Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about the music if it didn't fit. Welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today we are joined by C.L. Jarvis, the author of the Doctrines of Fire and also the Treatise of Air, books that I actually own, which is very, very exciting. So thank you for joining us today, C.L. Jarvis. We'll start off with introductions. Let us know who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, so my name's Claire. I'm writing under the name C.L. Jarvis. I'm a Scottish-born historical fantasy author who writes stories set in the late 18th century.
And congratulations on the release of the Treatise of Air. It only just recently came out, with Doctrines of Fire coming out earlier this year. Can you give us a bit of an introduction to your body of work and where this is going?
Yes, so the series I'm currently writing is called the Edinburgh Doctrines series. It's going to be a quartet with some standalones, possibly in the near future. The first book in the series is The Doctrines of Fire, and in it, a shy medical student at the University of Edinburgh teams up with two secretly magic-wielding professors to solve a series of mysterious student deaths, which may or may not have a dark magic connection. In the second book in the series, called A Treatise of Air, the wife of another medical student also gets involved with these same magic-wielding professors, though this time to try and recover a stolen industrial secret.
I cannot wait to read the second book. It sounds so cool. I was reading the blurb again while we were waiting to go live. Hello, Esme. Welcome in. Good evening. It's quite late for you. Is that right? Over there in, I want to say Netherlands, but I get you and Helen mixed up with Norway. Yes, I have been telling Esme to go and read these books. Hey, Steve. Welcome in. Thanks for chatting. So one of my favorite things, Claire, about this series is how much of a genre blend in it. And personally, it's something I really love about indie is that you have this creative freedom to go ahead and do that. So these books are a pretty unique blend of sort of historical, we've got mystery, thriller, and the fantasy elements all in there within Doctrines. I haven't read Treatise yet, but can I ask what sort of called you to write all of these elements together?
Yeah, and I think part of that, as well as being an indie author, is being a debut author. I think your first books are often like the weirdest mix-up of genres. In terms of this one, I think it kind of came out of my head like this, and I think it's probably due to the kind of books that I enjoyed reading and were inspired by. For instance, The Dante Club by Matthew Pearl is a book that I read about a decade ago and has stuck in my head. I always thought it kind of fun to have real historical figures teaming up to solve murders. To talk more specifically about kind of like how the Doctrines came about, I started off in my kind of day job as like a science writer. I was researching a woman called Elizabeth Fulham. She's a really fascinating historical figure. She was based in Edinburgh at the end of the 18th century, and it's very unusual for the time but she was involved in a lot of chemistry research, and she was actually the first to articulate the theory of catalysis about 40 years before it was traditionally discovered and named by Berghaus. And it was maddening to me, and it's been maddening to other amateur historians, that we have this published work by Elizabeth Fulham, but we know almost nothing about her. We don't know when she was born. We don't know what her maiden name was. Like, we don't have even proof that she's married to Thomas Fulham. There's no like church records, and I think a lot of like myself and other researchers have kind of looked at this and thought there's got to be more here if we just keep looking. So I was kind of like not just investigating her, but trying to get a sense of the world around her in Edinburgh, which was how I started reading up on Joseph Black, a very famous, one of like the first people you could call a chemist. And Elizabeth Fulham was like researching and commenting on phlogiston, which at the time was accepted as this as like an element in its own right, and she was instrumental in disproving its existence. And I wasn't having that much luck finding out about Elizabeth Fulham, but as I was reading about phlogiston, I sort of thought to myself, well, this sounds a lot like magic. It's kind of this ethereal element, liquid that's all around us in everything that is involved in combustion, allegedly. And that was just kind of very interesting. That was like the first spark in my imagination. And then the second was there is a connection between Thomas Fulham and John Brown and the Brunonians, who we meet in the Doctrines of Fire. They are there's a particular school of medical thought that was quite controversial at the time, and kind of reading about that, I think I thought, oh, there's a plot here about rival academics trying to kill each other. And so just sort of those two thoughts coming together at about the same time, which inspired me to come up with this story.
That's so cool. I just had a quick look at the blurb on the Treatise of Air. I was like, Elizabeth, I've heard that name before. So it's
Yes.
all about her. Yes, Esme, all the buzzwords. Read it already. Like, so I might ask you about the balancing now, coming off that question. So, obviously being inspired by these real life people who were around in the late 18th century, how did you go about balancing the historical accuracy for the people and also the fantastical elements? And I've just realized I've probably pronounced phlogiston wrong every time I've tried to say it.
I mean, I've not heard like an expert pronounce it, so my guess is as good as yours. Well, I think for like the first book, I'm probably more tied to historical events, and then in the Treatise of Air and the subsequent books, I probably have more confidence to move away from like what actually happened and just make stuff up. Like for the Doctrines, what I did was like reading biographies of Brown and of the real life academic rivalry and how that developed over the years. And from that, I could kind of get the plot points on the major dramatic events that I chose to show in the book, and kind of work out sort of what other things could reasonably be going around, and kind of if I took a snapshot in 1779 with the made up events kind of inform what, or naturally feed into what came next. And for a lot of this, it was, I read quite a lot of academic books on the 18th century and Edinburgh and on medical theories. I also read quite a lot of like Joseph Black and other people's correspondence to get a feel for how they wrote and how they spoke, which informs the language.
That's so cool. You have a very cool day job in my opinion. So I understand that you're quite the history buff, specializing around the 18th century and enjoying that. Now, having written this work of fiction inspired by these real events, can I ask, just out of pure curiosity, what about the time period calls to you? What inspires you about this time period?
Yeah, I'll make the disclaimer that I'm not a professional historian. I've not been like professionally or academically trained in the 18th century. I think what was like most interesting as I read about the 18th century, and what inspired me to like actually write fiction about it, was that there's this fascinating pull between what's startlingly modern and what's very old-fashioned. So, for instance, phlogiston is kind of what you'd think as alchemy, very magical, wishy-washy, hand-wavy pseudoscience. But at the same time, like Joseph Black and Elizabeth Fulham and those chemists are coming up with very like catalysis in like a sense of that we could understand it today with how water molecules influence the reaction. And like for Black, he was like did a lot of quantifying of reactions, and so was able to start disproving the existence of phlogiston and start like identifying all the different components in air. And you kind of see that in like in medicine, in like society as well. And I just think it's like it's fun to write in those types of time periods, because you can make like nods that the audience will understand today. And you can also kind of, I think you're well suited for talking about big themes and kind of or showing how events from the past are like relevant to today.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely got that in Doctrines, and watching Phlogiston was just really fun. As you're reading through the book and getting to play with that in a literary sense, I can imagine was also quite fun to
Mhm.
do. So it's sort of paired with this academic vibe. So Doctrines sort of feels like, I guess, a love letter to the exploration of research and what the outcomes can be within an academic setting. So how did you get into academia, and what inspires you about the academic world?
Mhm. Yes, so both my parents are academics. They're retired now, but they taught in a university setting. So I've kind of, like, I'm genetically academic, and I've also like growing up had experience in an academic setting. So I have a PhD in organic chemistry, and I think going to grad school, I was in quite a like a high stress environment where I think like it paid off on a survival level to understand the system of academia and kind of like the psychology of the individuals involved. And also because like um my lab was quite socially isolated, doing crazy hours research. So we did a lot of gossiping about academia and about the other academics in the department. So I kind of come from that background where I feel I'm very familiar with how academia is, and even though I'm not technically in it now, but I still in my day job I interact with a lot of like academic physicians and clinicians. So I do sort of still need a handle on how they interact.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, JMD. Um, welcome in, saying hello. Thank you for popping in. That's really cool. Like, I have not done anything sort of. I started a post grad and I just did not go into it because the field I went into, I was like, oh, I don't actually enjoy this outside of the theory of it. Like the prac, just
Mhm.
not for me. But it's always interesting to sort of hear people talk about that world. It's so intriguing. So thank you for sharing. If
Mhm.
I could move on to, I suppose, your writing process, having sort of released Doctrines of Fire early this year and the Treatise of Air quite recently in September. Can you give us an insight into your writing and release schedule? Because I can see we've already got the third and final installment sort of planned out for 2024.
Yeah, so I think I've made some terrible mistakes. I'll be honest. I wouldn't recommend to aspiring authors to do what I've done. I'd tell you to actually like get all your novels at least to first draft before you start releasing any of them. Um, I tried to do that, but I think I'm just naturally impatient. So Doctrines came out, and initially I thought that what's going to be the third book in the series would be the second. Those two books, 1 and 3, both star the protagonist George. But then I was kind of thinking about writing a story for Elizabeth, the protagonist of what came to be book 2. And I was sort of thinking about like the timeline of events, kind of which historical events I wanted to pin her to, and then realized that those events would come before the events of George's second book. So it was, like, relatively speaking, a scrabble to prepare the second book. Um, Although on the plus side, I think having the pre-orders up does motivate me to do the writing. I think without that, I'd be perhaps slower than I need to be, and it's kind of easy to lose track of your
It
goals.
definitely does put the deadlines on it once you got them up listed on the Zon ready for the pre-orders to come through. So
Mhm.
was that a conscious choice that you made to put all four up there, or just sort of happened?
I was pretty conscious. It was like business inclined, in that I wanted readers to see that I wasn't going to ghost them with my series, and that having, I think, at least if even when all 4 books weren't out, at least they could see that the books were coming and when. I think it has picked up some stray pre-orders, and I think hopefully it's inspired some people to like make a start now, kind of see what and see how the like the Doctrine series is gonna shape up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know I've already pre-ordered them because I love Doctrine, so I went ahead and was like, oh, they're all there. I'm just gonna put those pre-orders in. The stray pre-orders are me coming through. Um, so how have you found the world of, I guess, indie and self-publishing thus far? Because it's a beast of its own coming into the industry and sort of doing it all yourself. What has been your experience, like least favorite parts and your favorite parts about it?
Yeah, so favorite parts is that I think indie authors are your can be your biggest fans, and they're very like reliable cheerleaders. They're good to have on your ARC team because they understand the importance of reviews. It's not just a freebie to them, and like they understand how to give constructive reviews and why that's important. So all of that's very helpful. I've been involved in the Spiffbo self-published fantasy blog off this year, and that's been useful to help me find like a community of writers and interact, like, because it is like a large bunch of people, but it feels like within Spiffbo it is kind of like, I guess, my group, or a group of people that are like better fitted to me. Just because Doctrines is kind of hard to place in a clean subgenre, so it's nice to have that community. The disadvantage is just like the same 4 arguments keep on circling on social media every 3 months, and they're never resolved. Like should authors comment on reviews? Are 3-star reviews going to kill you? Like the ones that particularly annoy me are is spice in YA novels bad? And like, because I don't know who they're yelling at. I don't think
I've not seen that one. I've seen the first 2.
Yeah, that's just, well, that's kind of, I do have a foothold in the fantasy romance space on Instagram, and I mean, I don't think a lot of the books they're yelling about are necessarily YA, or at least not. It wasn't the author's intention to write them as YA. It's just been how they've been marketed. So I don't think there is this like cabal of YA fantasy authors deliberately writing sexy scenes to corrupt innocent teenagers.
Some of the arguments that come out are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah, so like, as long as you avoid those arguments, I think it's fine.
So you mentioned ARC readers. So my next question is sort of, how do you pull readers to your world? And it's awesome that you've made those connections with Spiff, but I think it's such a positive for the indie community to have that and to build those connections. And I think, you're right. I agree with you. Like, the indie community is what drives it forward, and we're all super passionate about it. So how have you pulled the readers to your world? Do you, excuse me, have a select group of like alphas? Do you do betas? Do you go straight down to ARC route? How have you found the marketing around it?
Yeah, so for the first book, before I had like a stable of other indie authors, I used Book Sirens and got a decent number of reviews through that. With Treaties, I've been able to target the people who've already read the first in the series. And I mean, I've been less stressed about reviews for book 2 because like people are going to have to read book 1 first anyway. So it doesn't matter as much. Yeah, I think that's...
There are a few comments that I missed, sorry. The films are a healthy relationship. We love to see it. We love to see stable relationships in any sort of genre.
Mhm.
Yeah, Steve, honestly, fair. Sometimes I'm just there with the popcorn being like, what's happening today? And it's normally Twitter or X that all this drama happens on. And because I'm asleep when all of it happens, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, what's transpired this evening while I've been asleep? So what, I guess further to that, once the book has been released and it's out into the world, do you try and market yourself further? Like, how do you market the books after release?
Yeah, so I haven't done like a lot of serious marketing. I said I'm most active on Instagram.
Mm.
I think it is kind of genre dependent, like which subgenres are on which social media site, and I think Instagram is like fairly decent. And now I've kind of found people on there who like me, so I'll stay there. I think I'm going to be doing more marketing when I have more books out. I perhaps like do paid ads or see about like more giveaways or newsletter promos.
It's always an interesting world to try and balance, I guess, the love of writing and trying to market as well on the side. I know a lot of indie authors feel almost disingenuous when they're trying to push the books out into the world. I'm the same. Instagram has been the most successful for me, even as a reviewer, to interact with authors. Yes, look, none of us are perfect. I also enjoy reading the drama just to see what's happening. Um, yes, it can be frustrating to do that. Yes, marketing is hell. Yeah, I know. Lots of people hate it. They hate that side of indie. Like that often comes up as the worst thing because people have to, it's great you've got the creative control, but then you have to sell it yourself. So we talked about earlier about the Edinburgh Doctrines, because I've just learned to pronounce it correctly, everyone, being a unique blend of genres. So can I ask what genres you enjoy reading yourself?
Yeah, I think if you like try to distill out the percentages of each genre in the doctrines and work backwards, you'll kind of see the percentages of each different genre that I personally read. So, I mean, I do read a lot of fantasy of kind of most genres. I'm pretty active, like reading arcs of other indie authors and kind of open-minded to just take what looks interesting. After that, it's historical fiction. And then, like, I don't read that many mysteries per se. I think I used to like read a lot more of that, and it's kind of baked in my brain from like way back. But I've not read of it, most of it, like recently. Um, After that, it's probably non-fictions like memoirs, history of science, that type of book, and then like a couple of like literary or contemporary things that are very like big enough to get on my radar that I want to check them out.
Good night. Thanks for stopping in. And do you have any standouts from the genres that you like to read?
So, like in terms of like the books that have like really influenced Doctrines of Fire, one of the biggest ones is it's by Laura Shepherd Robinson. She writes Georgian historical thrillers. Her book Daughters of the Night I enjoyed a lot. It has she's very good at weaving in period detail. Like she manages to pack a lot into the descriptions and the settings, so it never feels like purpley or overwritten, but like it is just like it's a very immersive experience. Um, like I think like the stereotypical dark academia classics, I like them all, like The Secret History, When We Were Villains, Ninth House by Lee Bardugo was a particular influence, in kind of blending the dark academia with fantasy in a setting.
I've been told to read that one. I've not read it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, the sequel for that kind of it goes off in a slightly different direction. So, but the first one I really enjoyed for the vibes and the darkness.
They've got some creepy covers, those books. When you look at them, you're like, oh, okay. So how do you as a writer get your creative juices flowing? Just for the other writers out there that come in and watch these interviews, do you personally follow a routine? Do you plot it out, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants and let the wind take you?
I mean, I think I'd do better if I planned more and had stricter routines. But well, I'm I'd say I'm more of a pantser, or intuitive writer, however you want to call it. I write out of order. That's my main thing. So, kind of the scenes that grab me, and then I've kind of got to go back and figure out like how to make a coherent plot out of all that. It does kind of it can be a challenge. I do a lot of writing sprints with there's groups like Shut Up and Write, which is predominantly US and UK based. There's also Writers HQ, which is more UK based. They do sprints, so that helps me motivation to get the words down and just um like put time in front of a computer.
That's really cool. I didn't know those things existed. To be able to like jump in as an author and just do sprints with other people, I'm guessing. So you've got a group in there, or
Yeah, so how Shut Up and Write does it is on their website they have hosts advertising. It's usually like 1 hour to 90-minute sprints at various times, and then you log on to Zoom, and like for most of that you're just muted and with your screen off, but
yeah,
you'll check in at the beginning and at the end to say what you've done.
that's cool. What a handy little tool. I'll find the link for the US and UK folk, and I'll pop it down in the description, for people if they want to go and check that out, because that's cool.
Mhm.
All right, so the last question, and one that a lot of authors really don't like, but I do it anyway, is what's next for you? So
Yeah, so I'll tell you.
we've got Chronicles of the Earth and Philosophy Metal, which have, yeah.
Yeah, so Chronicles of Earth, which is coming out early next year, I'll say it's based around a kidnapping. Whereas the first book was a murder mystery, the second was a heist, the third's like rescuing a kidnapped historical figure. The fourth book, the chronic philosophy of metal, goes back to Elizabeth Fulham as the protagonist, and that's going to be another murder mystery. I realized when I was like thinking about the plot for that Elizabeth and the two uh, physicians, Joseph Black and William Cullen, like fit the character archetypes from Only Murders in the Building. So that kind of excited me enough to like play with that dynamic and that kind of setup. There is also for the Edinburgh Doctrines, I'd either call it a prequel or a standalone that's set in the decades before the events of Doctrines 1 and focuses on Joseph Black and William Cullen fighting the Dark Chemists.
I'm
Um,
so in. I love that aspect of Doctrine, so like I'm ready. Now you mentioned novellas earlier. Is that the novella project that's on the side for this series?
um, so I do have a couple of other ideas for 18th century historical fantasy that's probably set in the same world. I may or may not be sick of writing Georgian historical fantasy by that point. And there's another project I'm thinking about that's more epic fantasy. Like a few months ago, I thought, well, if I need a break from all this historical research, I'll try and do a secondary world, more traditional epic fantasy. But then I find that I'm still kind of researching the historical period that I want to set it in, and like reading books on the subject. So I think I'll never get away from like heavily researching the background.
Look, we're all here for it, you know. Historical fantasy, like you've got the audience. We're here. Um, but that was awesome. Those are all the questions that I have for you. Blitz through them. Thank you so much for your time and for spending your evening with me. It's quite late for you at the moment. I think it's about 9:30 ish. Did I
Yeah.
get the times right when I sent it to you?
Yes, you did.
Steve's made a good point. I think it's just such an inherent nature that yes, sometimes it can be hard to switch off. Yes, thank you so much. Those was CL Jarvis, the author of Doctrines of Fire and the Treaties of Air, and early next year we have book 3 coming out, which I just forgot the title of, The Chronicles of the Earth. I do have the notes there. And then later in the year, Philosophy of Metal. A strict timeline that you've given yourself. But that was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here on the channel today.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll say goodbye to the audience. Thank you all for joining us and interacting. That was awesome and very much appreciated. See you, everyone.